there. I'd like to call to order this committee of the whole meeting of the town of Saugeen Shores and extend a welcome to everyone in the council chambers this evening. Our first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind every member of your responsibility to do so, and you can do so now or when it arises on the agenda. We have none declared, so the next item is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda, and we have nothing under that this evening. The next item is delegations. This evening we have one delegation, and it's James Skonyak, and he's here to give us an update on Bruce Fire. Welcome, James.
Good evening. Thanks very much for having me. It's hard to believe it's been a year since I was here last for the last annual update. So thanks very much for having me. Really what I want to talk about tonight is something that we've done as an ongoing practice over the last number of years, and that is provide an annual update to the municipal councils in the area. I want to cover a lot of things that many of you will have seen covered in the press, but give you a bit of a broader context in terms of how we ended 2015 at Bruce Power and what to think about for the year ahead. And I'd be also delighted to answer any questions people have as well. So in terms of year-end highlights from 2015, not a surprise to anybody in the room, one of the most significant achievements of the year was our long-term agreement announced on December 3rd. That was very significant for the business because that agreement took financial effect as of January 1st this year. So now we are operating under our new arrangement for the site that we signed on December 3rd. That means on our site we get one standard price for the entire site. And of course, one of the key elements with that deal is a multi-year investment program, which I'll talk a bit more about later. But that investment program is now underway, so we're getting one single site price. We're down to one consolidated partnership, one ownership structure for the site, and commencing with that investment program. We were also pleased last December to host an OSART mission. And OSART stands for Operational Safety and Review Team. And essentially what an OSART mission is it's a program that's been around since the early 1980s. And the program is run by the International Atomic Energy Agency. And the purpose of the program is to have member countries of IAEA submit themselves for regular international nuclear reviews. And the goal of these reviews is to have independent nuclear experts from across the world to come and evaluate a plant or evaluate a country. And Bruce Power was honored to have our facility put forward on behalf of Canada for this review. And actually the results of that IAEA review will be out later in April. Purpose of the reviews is very simple. It's to identify, of course, areas for improvement. That's a very consistent theme in the nuclear industry, but also identify good practices. And one of the things that's really important when we're thinking about good practices coming out of these reviews is the things that are identified as good practices have to be things that nobody else is doing anywhere else in the world. So you can do something great in your nuclear plant at Bruce or Pickering or Darlington, but if it's not something that isn't being done somewhere else in the world, they won't recognize it. And I think, and I don't want to predispose what the IAEA report is going to say, but suffice to say, they were very impressed with the Bruce site, and there were a lot of things that I think will be good lessons for other nuclear operators around the world. One of the things you hear us talk a lot about is our 30-30, which is produce 30% of Ontario's electricity at 30% below the average price. We set a record output for the site last year, which I'll talk a bit more about in a second, and also completed a fairly extensive outage program, primarily at Bruce B, where we had a vacuum building outage. One of the other big highlights for us in 2015 is we started down a new path to expand the cobalt that we provide to the international medical market by signing a memorandum of understanding with Nordion, which is an Ottawa-based company that focuses primarily in medical sterilization, creating a new long-term supply of what we call HSA cobalt. And essentially what HSA cobalt stands for high specific activity cobalt. But if we look at around the world, in particular with treatment of brain tumors and brain cancer, one of the challenges we have in the global isotope market is that a lot of these reactors that were built 30, 40, 50, even 60 years ago to produce medical isotopes for these kind of medical treatments. They're over the next 5 years reaching their end of life. So we have a challenge because obviously in the healthcare system, there's a growing demand for these kinds of treatments. The technology has advanced a lot, but across the world, there's a drop in demand for these kind of isotopes. So Bruce is going to look to produce what we call HSA cobalt at the Bruce site, which will augment our current program, and that'll be used ideally in kind of brain cancer treatment across the world. So it's something very exciting. We have a lot of due diligence underway on it, but we haven't officially decided to move forward with it yet because obviously there's a lot of due diligence. But that's going to be something you're going to hear a lot about, hopefully in 2016 as we advance that program. Of course, safety first, absolutely critical. It's great to have good business results, but you have to have the safety performance, and we ended 2015 with 12 million hours worked without a lost time injury. And as I mentioned, our site generation was again a record output year in 2015, and we're actually anticipating this year that if we maintain our levels of very strong performance that we've seen in recent years, that actually this year will also be a record output year. So that's a really strong message for the site. If we look at the last record that was set prior to Bruce Power's assuming the operation of the facility, it was actually in 1991. And then in 2013, we beat the 1991 record. Then in 2014, we beat the 2013 record. Then 2015, we beat the 2014 record. And hopefully in 2016, we'll beat the 2015 record. This kind of record output will not continue on a permanent basis, and that's not because we're expecting the performance of the site to decline, but as we begin to invest in major refurbishments and work to extend the life of our units, we'll be taking the units out on a more frequent basis for planned outages, which will obviously have an impact on generation. So, but it's really good to see that after returning to eight units of operation, that we're continuing to see not only strong performance, but year after year beating the output projections. It wouldn't be a proper Bruce Power update unless I also address the announcement of our CEO to retire. And I know many of you are attending our community celebration we're having for Duncan on April 20th. April 29th will be Duncan's last day at Bruce Power. It's with mixed emotions to have such a strong CEO and genuinely great community leader move on to retirement. Duncan obviously felt this was the right time for not only him personally, but also for the organization, having secured an 8-unit deal, having been CEO for a long period of time. And so this is obviously a period of transition for Bruce Power as we're transitioning with Duncan's retirement. Our current chief financial officer has been stepped up to the role of acting president during the transition, and we're also carrying out an external executive search. So, for all intents and purposes, it'll be business as usual at Bruce Power, but of course, with the change in leadership at the top, especially somebody of Duncan's caliber, is going to be a change, but I think we can all expect the same kind of strong performance from the company and same kind of openness and transparency with the community. And for those of you that haven't got your tickets or are planning to attend, we are planning a retirement event in Ripley on April 20th. We're expecting about 500 people in total, and it will be raising money for the Live a Little Foundation, which I know you're all familiar with here in Saugeen Shores, and also the Women's House of Grey Bruce as well. And a very fitting tribute to Duncan to raise money for a local charity as part of his retirement send-off. A lot of focus in the community on refurbishment and what does that look like. One of the terms you're going to start hearing a lot more of is not refurbishment. It's a term that really our future projects are based on, and it's called major component replacement. And we're not doing it just to be complicated and techy. But if you look at how we're tackling the next batch of life extension, when we carried out the return to service of units 1 and 2, we really had to do a full refurbishment on a unit because those units had been out of service for such a long period of time. So when we use the term refurbishment, we are really talking about fully refurbishing the entire plant from top to bottom. As we're looking at the life extension of units 3 to 8, Those are obviously operating units, and through outages and other campaigns, we're investing a lot of money in those units on an ongoing basis. So in order to life extend those units, yes, we have to continue with those activities, but the real focus is what we call a major component replacement. And those are really your key reactor internals and a lot of your sort of central life-limiting components. So if you see terms like major component replacement and refurbishment, essentially they mean the same thing. We're extending the reactor for a longer period of time. But as we begin to engage the community in our various regulatory proceedings, you'll hear us talk about major component replacement, because that's really the proper technical term for it. As I know many of you are aware, the first major component replacement will start in 2020 with Unit 6. So based on the transaction that we signed in December that took effect the 1st of January this year, you see our full refurbishment program running from 2020 right to 2033, and that's the sequence we're planning to advance. You can see there's a planned overlap between the units, and really what that does is it recognizes the fact that there needs to be some overlap of the units in order to take advantage of the fact that you staff up the workforce to do a certain amount of activity, and the idea here is that this workforce will rotate through the units as we refurbish them. And that overlap is very carefully planned to align with various evolutions in each of the refurbishments underway. Our plan is to submit, to lock in the refurbishment as per our contract in late 2018. Obviously, we're doing a lot of planning activities and whatnot right now to be ready for that 2020 start. And one of the things we're also going to be doing in parallel is we plan next year to submit a license application to our regulator, the CNSC, to seek a multi-year license that will cover the bulk of that refurbishment period. So as many of you are aware, just last year we had a 5-year license awarded for the site. That takes us to 2020. That license does not assume any refurbishment. Now that we have the deal, we'll look to extend that license and augment the information to cover that period. One of the things that's very important to us is you'll see us sort of mid-year begin to engage the community in that sort of licensing process. Anytime we file a license application, we do a lot of work on environmental assessments and those kind of things. So you'll be looking at probably an increased amount of community consultation, because we're really mindful of a lot of the socioeconomic impacts in particular of this work, and having a dialogue with the community that will inform our planning on that front. So very good news for the area. If this full refurbishment schedule progresses. The reason why I say if it progresses is because one of the things the provincial government was really strong on in this transaction was that this is not a free ride, in the sense of you, as Bruce Power, we have to perform on each of these refurbishments. In that total schedule, the province has 8 off-ramps. So they have an off-ramp related to every unit if we're not performing. And they also have off-ramps if supply and demand circumstances change in the province. Good news for the Bruce site is if we do what we said we would, when we said we would, there would be no need for the province to ever exercise those off-ramps. So it's a healthy level of accountability. You can imagine being in elected office, signing a 50-year power deal, multi-billions of dollars, wanting to make sure that there was some accountability in place with who you were signing the deal was delivering what you expected. So that's good for us. It allows us to keep our feet to the fire and to constantly focus on continuous improvement through the program. Talked a little bit about this. We'll be undertaking an environmental review related to our license application, and this will be no surprise to anybody, but one of the things we're going to focus a lot on this assessment, even though we're not required to do it through our license requirements with the CNSC, is have a significant discussion on socioeconomic impacts and the benefits of what we're doing. And that's multifaceted. You see the comments in the media from the medical officer of health later part of last year, talking about how the impact of economic activity and what that means to the health and wellness of people in the area and what that economic growth means. But also work that your CAO, myself, and other CAOs in the area have been involved in, working with the county around how do we look at a broader economic development look at this investment program. One of the real challenges that we have in Bruce Power Space is that the economic impact of the site, it's obviously very significant in Saugeen Shores, but it's very significant across the region. And when suppliers or other people are looking to relocate to the region, their characteristics around relocation tend to be very general. They're not very specific around one municipality or another. You know, you can have a supplier that's looking for a warehousing facility to do A, B, or C in. So our approach through the conversation we're having on economic development is actually something your mayor put a bug in my ear about middle part of last year before our deal was finalized, is how do we look at this in a broader from a broader perspective, where we're not having multiple municipalities kind of trying to do the same thing related to Bruce Power, and it's very consistent with what we've done with physician recruitment. So we're very excited about that, and you know, in the coming months we'll have more to announce on that front. Be remiss if I didn't talk about emergency preparedness enhancements. With all the excitement of the deal and outages and investments, sometimes this gets overshadowed, but we put a lot of effort last year, and it'll continue into this year, on emergency preparedness enhancements. Worked very closely with the municipalities and Saugeen Shores in particular on Ki tablets. They are fully deployed now throughout the area. I like to call this the redistribution of Ki tablets, because when we say distribution, it implies to people that we didn't have them before. And really all this was a very complicated way of saying, instead of keeping them in one place, we're dispersing them throughout the region, which is a best practice. So that program is complete. And one of the things I'll talk about later is the ongoing communication with that. We're focused on our public siren system upgrades, looking to move to new FM alert receivers in houses, and also looking at updated evacuation studies. One of the things that's always a challenge when you're talking about emergency preparedness is the intention of this is to make people feel more confident, not less. But sometimes by talking about it, you can create, you can alarm people. And I just very recently, I had the pleasure over in King Carden of ribbon cutting a decontamination facility, which we hope we'll never need. But of course, it's the appropriate thing to do to make sure those facilities are in place. And when we had the media at this ribbon cutting, I said, I'm not actually sure how reassuring this is to people that we're talking about a decontamination facility. Good news in our community is people are very familiar with the nuclear industry and very accepting of the fact that I really think there's an expectation that people see us constantly enhancing these various activities. But this is a reflection of the fact that emergency preparedness always needs to be renewed. It can't be something that you just put in place and it's a plan on the shelf, that it always needs to be renewed. One of the things we'll be doing again this year in conjunction with the municipalities and the counties is we will be producing a community safety guide that will go out in May. You may remember years and years ago, you used to go for all your emergency information at the back of your phone book. Well, the challenge nowadays is a lot of people don't have phone books. They may not even have landlines for that matter. So what we've tried to do is make this information available in places, in a multitude of places where people can get that information. We launched a new website called Be Prepared Grey Bruce Huron for people that want to get it online. They can get it through social media. But there's still a lot of folks who like to have that information available in their homes. And given the fact that phone books are something that aren't distributed on a frequently of a basis, we decided to put this community safety guide. The good news for the municipality with things like this is that the nuclear component is only one part of the safety guide. The fact we're paying to produce and mail these to every household allows all the municipalities the chance to put information in these for things that are more likely, like loss of power or ice storms or you name it, the types of things that are more frequent. So we're happy to partner with the municipality on those things. Despite the fact that we have a long-term deal, you're going to see us still talk a lot about our long-term plans. Councillor Matheson and I just had a conversation about what can we do working with local high schools and guidance counselors to give teachers and students more information on what careers are available. Now that we have a long-term deal, we can have those longer-term conversations, and those are the kind of discussions we look forward to continuing. Later this year, the Ontario government will be renewing their long-term energy plan. Bill 135 is before the provincial legislature, and basically what Bill 135 is going to do is entrench in legislation the long-term energy plan process, where every 3 years the government will produce a long-term plan. Coming out of that long-term plan, the IESO will implement that. It's very unlikely that Bruce Power's role in that long-term plan will change this year after just signing such a big deal. But you will see us be very active in this consultation process, because one of the things that we've learned is that when we take our foot off the gas when it comes to promoting the role that nuclear power plays, that tends to be when a lot of the misinformation from special interest groups and anti-nuclear groups tends to come up. So we want to remain very focused on getting those facts out. It's really interesting. After the announcement in December, over a 14-day period, we did polling every single day as to what did people think about our deal. And the more people heard about the deal through the advertising, the more receptive they were to the deal, the more they understood the facts. And the number one message that people in Ontario resonated with people in Ontario was 30% of your electricity at 30% below the average cost of power. There's a real concern on energy prices in Ontario. Sometimes I never like to defend levels of government. It's their job to do that, but it's really tough if you're the energy minister, because you're trying to make these difficult decisions, and the only decision you can make is that bills don't go up as much as you would like. You can never really reduce prices, which is a heck of a position, but it's his job, not ours. But the one thing we can do is make sure that we communicate our role within that context, and that 30-30 is a message you're going to see us drive very significantly. And I know I'm probably almost out of time, so I'll just wrap up with our Huron Resolve. Many of you will recall Huron Challenge that we carried out a number of years ago, and this is again a similar drill to Huron Challenge, where we'll work with the municipalities, and again it's about testing our emergency response capability, and will require significant municipal support with that, which through your CAO and your fire chief and others have just been continue to be tremendous. So that's I could talk for hours, as you know, but happy to answer any questions or any comments.
Thanks very much, James. Questions or comments? Councillor Grace.
Thank you. Hi, James.
Hi.
I have a couple of questions. One, just in terms of the community safety guide. You said that's going to be mailed to every household.
Yes.
Will that be mailed as a registered as like a piece of mail, or will it be like a leaflet? Because some people have orders on their mailboxes that they don't get.
Yeah.
That kind
so
of mail.
So it's a good question, because we had this issue actually with some cottagers in Southampton last year. So we mailed this last year. We did 40,000 of them. So the most efficient way to do this is with people receiving them in their mailboxes directly. For people who, for whatever reason, don't have a mailbox, don't want a mailbox our way, put a block on it, what we do is we make these guides available at the municipal offices for people to pick up. And Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe... Library repositories, so they're available broadly. Okay. And this year we also plan, like we did last year, we run ads in the local papers to remind people if you want a free, and they can also call the visitor center, we'll mail them one. But it doesn't help if they didn't get the mailing in the first place.
So then the tablets, you said they're fully deployed.
Yes.
So how do people get them if they want them?
Yeah, so there's two different ways of looking at this. People who are within 10 kilometers of the Bruce Power site, for people that have chosen to accept them, they're actually in people's homes within 10 kilometers of the site. And for people within 50 kilometers of the site, there wasn't a requirement for us to distribute them to people's households. There was really a requirement for us to make them available at more locations. So they're available at pharmacies. We have them available at stock at the fire hall. We have them at various locations. So in the unlikely event of a nuclear emergency, we would have them allocated for local distribution. For people within the 50-kilometer area, for whatever personal reason would like to have them in their home, they're welcome to do that. And inside the community safety guide, there's a little coupon you can rip out. Okay. And you can go to your local pharmacy, and the addresses are in the back there, and you can get one. There's been very little pickup on that, but people are welcome to do that.
Okay. I also wanted to know, when you were going back to the evacuation study by the KLD engineering group, and you said there was a phone survey to residents that was completed on February 4th. Do you have any? Do you know how many were surveyed and where they resided?
Well, the evacuation study will be in the evacuation zone. So when we do it, and this is also in the community safety guide, you'll see there's a primary zone and a secondary zone. So what they, I don't actually know the exact number. What they would have done is what we call a representative sample. So in all likelihood, if you're looking at a 50, I'm just doing some quick math, if you're looking at a 50 kilometer zone, you're probably within the range of 50,000 people. A representative sample, 19 times out of 20, 3.5% plus or minus, would probably be in the range of 500 to 600 calls. Knowing this evac group for the evacuation study, they probably went higher than that. But we'll be making the evacuation study available to the municipality, to members of council, so you can certainly take a look at that, and we'd be happy to, when it's available, sit down and take you through it. And one of the things we find a real challenge with the phone surveys is a lot of people just get inundated with phone surveys now, whether it's polling people or people selling things. And so sometimes they have to make a lot of calls to get enough respondents. So we tend to use a combination of things, but happy to take you through that when it's out, and other members of council if you're interested, and give us some feedback.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Mike Myatt.
Mr. Mayor. Well, first I wanted to say thank you, James, for your presentation, and I guess extend a thank you to Bruce Power for your ongoing support for numerous number of projects that people have supported over the years, whether it be our Port Elgin Library or the accessible playground or skate park or numerous other projects. We have other projects in the future too, with a new pool on the horizon and some other.
You're not going to ask me for a splash pad tonight.
But anyways, I had a couple.
They've already twisted my arm. There's a process, and it's a great project.
A couple of questions. James, you mentioned about 2016 and $2 billion over 48 months for Unit 6, and I'm just wondering the lead up, the ramping up to 2020.
Yep.
Will there also be significant investment down at the Bruce between now and 2020 leading up to, and what kind of dollars are we talking about, and jobs created? I'm not sure about the process happening over the next 3-4 years, but I understand there will be some investment. Can you touch briefly on that? Yeah,
it's a good question, because one of the things there was a bit of a myth about when we announced the deal was there were some people that were, if I could characterize it, maybe disappointed that the first refurbishment wasn't starting until 2020, and did that mean economic activity would be less versus if we had started earlier? So the way I'd answer that is twofold. The first thing is, you're absolutely right, Mike, that if we look at that roughly $2 billion in spend on Unit 6, there's a lot of spend that will be taking place now. So if you sort of look at it in terms of rough numbers, about a quarter of that will be spent in the lead up to the refurbishment, and that really includes things like engineering, project management, but a lot of procurement along lead items. So right after the deal, we signed a MOU with BWXT in Cambridge and another organization who's making some other reactor components. So a significant portion of that will be spent in the pre-2020 period. So since we're in Saugeen Shores, it's very appropriate. If you look at that entire mall that is kind of taken over mostly by Bruce Power across from McDonald's, that's where the Unit 4 MCR team is based. And they're totally dedicated at that, and you can see they're kind of expanding for some more space. Big picture though, Mike, if you look at it, if you look at the spend between 2016 and 2020, overall, with outages, life extension, the pre-MCR work, there's as much money spent, actually more money spent from 2016 to 2020 than there is in one MCR. Because obviously we're doing a lot of outage work and a lot of activity. So you could look at it and say from 2016 to 2020, you have a virtual MCR of spend. It almost works out to about $1 billion a year.
Okay. And Mr. Mayor, if I might, my second quick question, well, hopefully it's quick. When you talk about demand, James, and you talked about 47.28 TW.
Terawatt hours. We're bad with that.
A little bit. It's a lot of power. I know that much. You talk about demand, and you talk about the number of industries, factories, business moving out of the province south of the border. Mount Sound alone has lost 10 industries over the last 20 years. Obviously, that creates a lesser demand for hydro. You talked about your capability of producing up to 30% of the province's hydro demands. Are we producing a Bruce Power? I say we, but producing Bruce Power with the loss of the amount of power required to power up all these major industries that we tend to be losing it across the border. What happens to the demand in that case? Like, are we producing more hydro than what our requirements are. And I don't want to get into the wind turbine situation.
Sure.
I'm talking about nuclear power. Are we producing more power than that's required? And if so, what happens to that surplus power?
So the answer is yes and no, which isn't an answer. So maybe we'll just kind of take a step back because I think you raise a really good question. So big picture, if we look at Ontario big picture, you're right. There has been a drop in demand over the course of the last 10 years, and that drop in demand has come in a few different areas. In particular, to your point, Mike, a lot of industrial baseload of demand has dropped off the system. What we are seeing is where the growth is taking place in the Ontario economy, and we just all know this from, just if you've been to the GTA, if you look at where has been the most economic growth in Ontario, well, it's been in the sort of residential, you see condos going up and the GTA, massive expansion of homes and other dwellings. In fact, somebody told me a statistic, and I checked and it was true, that at the end of 2014, there were more cranes in Toronto operating in the GTA, building condo buildings, other things, than in the entire United States of America. And that's true. We checked it. So in the GTA, massive growth. So where we've been growing, they are growing in residential condos that have less energy intensity than where the decline has been in. So over, if you looked at what the IESO has, there has been a net sort of drop in electricity consumption overall. And people generally believe consumption will be fairly flat over the next 15 years, with the puts and takes and all those things. So generally, consumption line flat. The thing that has changed the most, Mike, is how has the power market changed? So you had coal was 30%, that was gone. That was running 50% base load, 50% flexible. So it was meeting all your flexibility. So that was gone. So then you had to replace coal with something. Well, anything, unless you do full gas, anything you replace coal with isn't as flexible as coal was. So all of a sudden now you don't have a coal energy source that when electricity peaks, you crank up your coal plants. You have to build a supply mix that assumes the peaks and then you ramp them down. So we've almost flipped it. So you are right. We are producing more power than we need sometimes, but have enough power for the peaks when we need it. One of the things that you're going to see a lot of conversation about, I think, in the long-term energy plan, and I should have put it in this slide, is where does the province want to go with electric vehicles? Because that's the solution to a lot of this, right? If you think about it, Ontario's electricity system is almost zero emissions. So if we want to reduce emissions in Ontario, there's not much more to go at in electricity. So the next frontier, people believe, is transport. So in the IESO's long-term forecast to 2035, they're assuming in Ontario we're going to have 600,000 electric vehicles by 2035. Mike, that's the way of flattening out that, and that's why we're such a strong promoter of electric vehicles, because when will people plug in electric vehicles? Well, in the evening when we don't need the power. So then we actually have a power system that's very well built for that. I think, Mike, and correct me if I'm wrong, the heart of your question is if demand changes, what does it mean to the Bruce site? Are we risk of not needing 30% of electricity, is I think maybe where you were going. You have to remember in 2024, Pickering will reach its end of life. So Pickering right now is about 17% of Ontario's electricity. So you're seeing the amount of nuclear dropping dramatically in Ontario when Pickering leaves. So as long as we can deliver those refurbishments and manage our costs and deliver what we said we would do, there's a very good role for Bruce Power there. So that's a long answer to your question. But maybe what I'll do, if it's okay, Mr. Mayor, I'll circulate to council a deck that the IESO just released last week on this, and it gives you a bit of an outlook on that. But a lot of people get concerned because they see big businesses closing, pulp and paper mills. What does that mean, right? It's a challenging picture.
Thanks. Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick ones. So the Bruce Power Mall that's out in Port Elgin there, it says contact Duncan for lease space. Is there? Should I read anything into that?
There was probably a conspiracy theory about that.
Sure,
that rumor in town, but no, that's not Duncan Hawthorne.
Okay, so more importantly, are you thinking that you're at max space needs there, or can we help with some economic development create more space somewhere if Bruce Power is looking for it?
Well, it's a great question. To be honest, anytime we've needed input on space, the municipalities tripping over themselves to help us. So thanks for the offer again. I think right now they're looking at expanding at that back end there, and we're going to have one of the things we're looking at on site is what is our site master plan to accommodate all this? What goes on site? What goes off site? Obviously, the municipalities are keen to have more things off site, but we got to think of logistics with those things. So that's what I'm hoping this new role that Larry and I are working on with the county will help with is how do we look at our site master plan and fit in a broader kind of look at that. But thank you for the offer.
One more, Councillor Dave Mayat.
Yeah, very quickly. Thanks, James, once again for coming over, and we appreciate seeing you all the time. And thanks for the invite to Duncan's going away party. That'll be a good time, and it'll be an honor to be there. And just one point of clarification. What you call a splash pad, we call a juvenile decontamination facility.
Okay,
so,
there you go.
Just keep that in mind.
I'm not sure I'll adopt that one, but if you're trying to looking for a new envelope of funding, it sounds like. But no, that will go to sponsorship, not emergency preparedness.
Won't be too high on the list. Thanks very much, James. It's always nice to see you come here and all the information. I did just one comment. I was at the Canadian Nuclear Association conference in Ottawa recently, and I have good relationships with the Mayor Clarington and Mayor Ryan, and we talk about these things always, of course, but they're always astounded at how the good relationships that we have here in Bruce County with Bruce Power, and it's nice to go down there and hear that from some other people, and I know it's a lot of work that you people do, and we thank you for that.
Great, thank you. That's great. Have a great meeting.
The next item on the agenda is the General Government Staff Report, and it has to do with the Stopgap Program, and our Clerk, Linda White, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is in response to the Accessibility Advisory Committee's presentation to the Committee of Whole at your March 14th meeting regarding the Stopgap Program. The attached policy has been drafted to implement the Stopgap Community Ramp Project. The purpose of the program is to create awareness about barriers in our built environment by supplying free or minimal cost deployable ramps to eligible businesses in Saugeen Shores. The policy provides that a business owner who is interested in receiving ramp is required to complete the application, and in order to be eligible for a ramp, a business must have a single step storefront of 6 inches or lower. The municipal staff, in consultation with the Accessibility Advisory Committee, will review the application and take the necessary measurements to determine if the entrance qualifies for a ramp. Once approved, the ramp will be custom built by volunteers in accordance with the Stopgap Program requirements and applicable accessibility standards. If the ramp is to be placed on municipal property, the business owner is to provide proof of liability insurance in the amount of $5 million, naming the town of Saugeen Shores as an additional named insured. The ramp is to be given to the business owner free of charge or at a minimal cost to the business owner. The business owner will be required to sign a waiver located at the bottom of the application form confirming the use of, responsibility, and liability of the ramp. A sign will be provided by the town for the business owner to place in the front window informing the public that a temporary ramp is available for their use. The business owner is responsible for placing the ramp at the entrance when needed and removing the ramp when not in use. If the ramp becomes unsafe or in need of a replacement, it will be the business owner's responsibility to have it repaired or replaced in accordance with the policy and applicable legislation. The Accessibility Committee will work with the Chamber of Commerce and the local BIAs to implement the program. The committee proposes that the materials for the ramps will be donated and the ramps constructed by volunteers. Some funds may be required from the Accessibility Committee's budget to purchase additional materials. And the financial impact is the cost for material may be obtained from the Accessibility Committee's budget if required.
Thank you, Linda. Then the recommendation is that Council considers approving the Stopgap Community Ramp Project Policy. Comments, questions? Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a great program, something that's really going to be of great benefit to business owners as a stopgap in downtown Southampton and Port Elgin to get us through to compliance with the accessibility requirements. And for that reason, I would really like to see us develop a policy here that is going to get some uptake, and I'm concerned that the $5 million of general liability insurance is going to be a drag on the program. Downtown business owners don't carry $5 million in liability insurance. None of them do. The $2 million is is pretty well the average for what a business in downtown carries. And to go to $5 million all the time will be a significant premium increase for business owners, which is going to be a drag on the program. We saw this occur with the perpendicular sign program that were, with the adjustment and the policy around perpendicular signs a number of years ago. It was a concern that was raised by business owners, and it will be a concern again, I'm sure. And I'm concerned that that's going to prevent people or restrict people from taking part in this very worthy program. So, and I appreciate why $5 million is in there as a recommendation from our insurer. My argument would be, and it was the same argument that we made during the perpendicular sign item, was that if you want this to be a successful program, if we want it to work, and we do, I think we do, then we need to determine what level of liability the municipality is going to accept on this. And I think a little bit more, if we accept a little bit more than what we're obviously willing to accept in this draft policy, that could be very beneficial to this program. I think the benefit, frankly, outweighs the risk in this case. So my suggestion would be that we lower the requirement in the policy to $2 million in general liability insurance. I'm prepared to make a motion on that, Mr. Mayor, if necessary, but at this stage, perhaps it could be a suggestion for going forward and to be brought back in an amended version of the policy to regular council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think the CAO wants to speak to it.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, the senior staff did have some dialogue on 2 versus 5 and did consult with the municipality's insurer, and the strong recommendation is 5. It's council's call in the end if it wishes to assume $3 million of risk. I think staff would be quite comfortable if there was a motion to that effect.
I think, sorry, if you want to speak to this particular issue, Neil? No, okay, just to deal with this, that's not really part of the recommendation, so I think we can just do it as with a consent that it comes back at $2 million. Is there anyone objecting to that? Sir, okay. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
It's just a question. Are we consistent with $5 million across all of the interactions we have, encroachments, use of facilities? Have they all crept up to $5 million? Because that would be something that I agree with the Deputy Mayor. But have we been changing everything, or are there some elements of interaction that still have a $2 million limit that this would be more like them?
Through Mr. Mayor, that is the new, quote, standard benchmark, unquote, so not everything we have today has the $5 million valuation, and the Deputy Mayor is quite correct. We've had this conversation a number of years ago with respect to the signs, and the council determination was $2 million was adequate.
Councillor Minaj.
I didn't have anything to say about that, but I do now. So what is the reflective difference to a business owner and hundreds of dollars per year between the 2 that we're being told is a good number and the 5 that we're being told is the must number? So if we can get that information that, an average business is going to cost them this amount of money and it's going to cost them this amount of money more. So my nitpicking for this document is based on the comprehensive zoning bylaw, which says this new comprehensive zoning bylaw is going to eliminate all imperial units. So we make reference to 6 inches twice in this document, and I would like to see it move to 15 centimeters and keep all of our documents in the municipality into metric and not imperial. Thank you.
Okay. So any other comments to this? I think staff's got some direction on this. All in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any? That's carried. The next item on the agenda is the Planning Development Staff Report, and it has to do with the update to our comprehensive zoning bylaw, and our Manager of Development Services, Bart, will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once the official plan had been approved by Bruce County, Saugeen Shores proceeded to update the comprehensive zoning bylaw. Tonight, staff brings to Council the proposed amending zoning bylaw as recommended by the Saugeen Shores Advisory Committee. The Council Consultation process for the amending zoning bylaw started in March of 2015. Staff undertook the consultation process to solicit input from individuals, council members, various public agencies like the SPCA, the County of Bruce Planning Department, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Ministry of Transportation, Ministry of Natural Resources, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, Wisterio, Hydro One, Union Gas, Grey, Bruce Health Unit, Bruce Grey, Roman Catholic Separate School Board, Blue Water District School Board, neighboring municipalities in Brockton, Erin Elderslie, South Bruce Peninsula, Kincardine, First Nations, Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, Historic Saugeen Métis, and the Métis Nation of Ontario. The community organizations, the South Saskatchewan Residents Association, Chamber of Commerce, Port Elgin, and Southampton BIAs, builders, developers, and other interested parties were all invited to comment and participate in the process. The town hired Jim Diamond from MHBC Planning to provide expert planning advice and to provide assistance to the town staff and the Planning Advisory Committee in addressing the following issues: secondary dwelling units, garages and driveways, home occupations and home industries, comments from the Southampton Residential Association. Staff held 3 open houses in addition to 1 statutory public meeting and received 38 written comments. Planning Advisory met on 8 separate occasions to address zoning amendments. More than 90 changes to the bylaw have been approved at the Planning Advisory Committee before this document was presented to the Committee of Whole this evening, with the recommendation that the bylaw be considered by Council as presented.
Thank you, Bart. The recommendation is that Council consider passing the attached amendment to the comprehensive zoning bylaw. Comments or questions? Sorry, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am glad to see some of the changes made in the proposed amendments. I have some concerns. I guess my greatest concern before us tonight, I'm a sub on the Planning Committee, and I'm grateful because it's given me the opportunity to look at this for many months and spend many hours in and out of committee, either as an observer or on my own time or as a member of the committee subbing for somebody. To consider the changes. And I think, I guess I would say for us to get this document and consider it over a holiday weekend, I feel like we need more time as a committee to be able to really fully digest the proposed changes and perhaps even have a special meeting so that that's devoted to this particular topic with the whole of the committee to ask questions. And I know we have a planning committee, but I think that we're the ones who are going to be ultimately voting to either approve or not approve this very important bylaw. And so I would like to see us defer approval of this to give us a couple more weeks to look at this, to consult with, as councillors, to consult with individuals who have possible concerns about this.
I'm going to go here for, I guess then if that is a motion to defer, I need a seconder for it. And Councillor Huber will second? Okay. So then, I guess now we have a motion to defer the recommendation. And so, is any comments to the motion to defer? Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am prepared to vote on the document this evening. I've been following this all along through its major revisions all along. So I feel like I have a pretty strong understanding of the document and could vote on it this evening. And although I would not be offended if it was deferred, if that's Council's wish, my only comment would be to the notion of deferral would be I wouldn't like to see this drag on and for Council to revisit the process of disassembling and reassembling the document. My wish would be for us to move the document along. The revisions aren't, there are some revisions, but the document isn't terribly different from the previous document. Get this document approved, and then begin the process much sooner of re-envisioning how we do this all together, coming up with, I think, a new approach to zoning and site plan and minor variance under the leadership of council rather than the Planning Advisory Committee. And so if it is deferred, I would not like to see it deferred and delayed for a long time. I'd like to see us get past this and move on to the much more important, in my view, job of totally overhauling how we undertake zoning in the town of Saugeen Shores. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I guess I need clarification, and then your motion is to defer, but I think, is there a time frame on it? A time frame?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I would say that ideally I would say the 25th of April, which is a month from now.
Comments? Councillor Myatt.
Mr. Mayor, I am a member of PAC, and I've spent, like Councillor Grace and Vice Deputy Mayor Huber, spent a considerable amount of time on this zoning bylaw, dating back to March 2015, 1 year ago. 3 public meetings, 8 individual meetings in total. I think ample opportunity for the public to come forth. I remember our chairperson cutting off conversation one of the meetings, and the person spoke up, said, "Can I speak again?" And absolutely, speak again. Came the next meeting, we thought it was done. The public wanted to speak again. Go ahead, speak again. And I think we've done a really good job of listening. I'm not saying it's necessarily the ideal zoning bylaw update for some people in our community, but I think trying to be everything to everybody and be right in all cases probably was not possible in the zoning bylaw. There's some people we're probably not very popular with, but I guess I probably wouldn't get in the way of deferral. I suppose I'd rather see it approved this evening and move forward with approval of the bylaw. It's been 1 year, and I just don't know. I don't know what more the PAC group can do to bring this forward in a more complete manner. So I was prepared, like our deputy mayor, prepared to vote on it this evening and have it approved. And I think delaying it another month after working on this for 1 year, I'm not sure that's necessary. But anyways, those are my comments. I think the PAC group, there was a 4-1 vote, I think, at our last meeting on a particular topic. I think the committee was fairly unanimous to bring it to council. But anyways, I was prepared to support it tonight.
Thanks, Councillor Rich.
Well, why don't we bring it back, split the difference, bring it back on the 11th, gives everybody a couple of weeks to look at it again. I don't think it's going to make a significant difference if it waits one more meeting and then gives people a chance to make comment to Bart, and if they want.
I'm going to comment on it, and I was going to wait till the end, but I agree with you, Mike. I think there's been a lot of consultation going into this. Nobody should be able to complain that they didn't have an opportunity to speak to the committee, because there was plenty of opportunities, whether you're the public or whether you're a council member. If you're interested in this topic, you've had lots of opportunity to interact with the community. I don't see what I'm struggling with. What do we accomplish by deferring 2 weeks that we haven't done over the last year and a half with this? So that's my comments to it. I'll let you, Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. The report that we got highlights 4 particular items, and the secondary dwelling units, that's been a conversation at PAC for the last couple of years. There's been a couple of applications that caused some concern and a lot of participation from neighbors and that sort of thing. So in particular, the last line of that paragraph talks about a number of provisions that we need to be satisfied to permit them. That's an important thing for people around the table to realize that there is something there now that hopefully will be helpful in that discussion. The garages and driveways, that's, I think, sometimes I forget which term of council items came up, but I think all of us were involved when that first came before this council with some requests about that. One of the areas that was of particular concern, which was the last item that PAC got to, was the number 3, home occupations and home industries. And, we've had a couple of applications to PAC in the last couple of years that this has been a pretty involved topic with interest from neighbors again. So this was the last item that PAC sort of waffled with. And one of the important things to note is that when it went through the last Planning Advisory Committee, and I was the dissenting vote, by the way, I was the 4-1, I was the one who voted against this. The second vote that happened right after that vote was that there was a provision put through PAC that it was kind of a 1-year period, and then there was an opportunity presented, hopefully for a review if it wasn't working. I guess I would rather that we take a little bit of time and all of us really take a good look at that section, because I don't think that we should be doing something and then just saying, well, in another year we'll look at it. We already have this period of time when we look at things. So this was one area that was really very much a long conversation at PAC. And, it comes down to limiting, things where they can happen. And, certainly the idea is that we have an industrial park and we have areas of the town where, we're encouraging business to occur and activities to occur. And the idea is that a home occupation or a home industry is perhaps an incubator type activity that then once it grows to a certain point, it bounces into one of the other areas of the town where, we've got other activities. So, and there's differences between the urban settlement area and the rurally zoned or rural designated areas of our community. So this is one that I suspect is going to come back to planning at some point with applications in the near future. And all of us will potentially be the planning committee. So I would encourage just a diligent look at that, which, I would agree with Councillor Rich. Perhaps coming back on the next agenda would be a good enough time period to just give it a good look. But in particular, I think we've tried to pick up on the idea that secondary dwelling units, the province has said you got to do it, but we found a way to put at least a couple of parameters there that will hopefully give some neighborhoods a sense that there still is a little bit of control, that if they're in a single-family residential zoned area, that there's not going to be a proliferation of extra residential units in there. The home occupations and home industries, that's a tough one, and certainly PAC made a decision, but there was a second vote that said, it's sort of for a year. So take a good look at it, because when you vote on this, I would rather that we not have to relook at it again in a year. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I should say we should be really kind of talking to the motion to defer, not the main motion. So if we'll get time for that, depending when this first motion gets dispersed with. So you're next, and if it's to the motion to defer, that's fine. If it's to the main motion, then I'd ask you to withhold it until we get there. Okay. Okay, I think we'll get that. We'll get that point. But the motion we're discussing now is to defer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just to the motion to defer, and I just wanted to put a finer point on my comments before, because I really think Council needs to look at this through a different lens. Not that I do not disagree with anything the Vice Deputy Mayor necessarily has said, or any of those things, and I don't wish to, and this is not a criticism of the Planning Committee, because I think they did fine work as well as staff on this subject. From where we have come, we have wound up, in my view, with a deeply flawed document, one that is not serving the municipality well, not because of the work that PAC has done, but because of everything that has come before that and leading up to today, and because PAC was given no mandate by us to do anything more radical with the document. But we need to give that direction. We need to make more radical change. In 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years working on this document is not going to improve it in any substantive way to make it serve the community better. We need a totally different approach to this. In my view, we need development permits. We should, you know, the PAC has done tremendous work on this. PAC and staff, they've got us to a point where we can have something to hold our place for until we do something more radical, I think, with this. And we should pass it, and then we should move on to reassessing the entire process. I do not use the word radical lightly. I think it needs a radical readjustment, and so let's not spend time on this document. let's get it out of the way, and let's move on to something that works better for all of us and better for the community. I think we can get there, and council can lead the way on that in the position of the Planning Advisory Committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
For you to Jay, I have a question of Jay and just a couple comments. Just what our Vice Deputy Mayor commented on, and that was about the home occupation, home industry.
Mike, this is to the deferral motion, not to the main motion. Well, okay, we will have that discussion. This is what's on the floor now. I don't want to get bogged down on this because we're getting to talk to the main motion, and some of us aren't prepared to do that tonight. Okay,
but I'm just that's fine, Mr. Mayor. But there's inaccuracies in what our Vice Deputy Mayor is saying. And
we can deal with that. I don't think that
it was a 4-1 vote. It was a 4-1 vote. The committee felt very, very strongly about home occupation, home industry, taking the recommendation of our consultant.
Mike,
so
I'm going to ask you one more time, Mike. Okay, very briefly, because you're speaking to the main motion here.
Okay, so to you, to Mr. Mayor, to Jay, and our Deputy Mayor mentioned about the permitting system, and my question was, Jay, is that a significant amount of dollars down the line that we may be talking about a permitting system?
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, the degree to which it's a radical change yes, I think it's significant just to be able to understand this.
So. Well, try and get back to the motion to defer now. Okay, that is what we're discussing. Councillor Minaj.
Okay, so now I've changed my mind. Now I need to talk about deferral because the Deputy Mayor has convinced me that it's the right thing to do, and because if we're going to get this document right until the new process is in place, we need time to defer it to get it right. I found some errors in it, and yes, I've had many years and many months, and I didn't catch them until now, and I can explain them. But I think that deferring it to get the document right, because it's the document that we're going to use for the next few weeks and months until the Deputy Mayor brings the new proposal forward to change it. So my answer is we should defer. Thank you.
Any further questions? I think
Councillor Minaj made my...
Okay.
Thank you.
I had a pretty good discussion on this, so I'm going to ask the question. All in favor of deferring? For 2 weeks. All in favor of deferring for 2 weeks? Opposed? So we defer. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Next item on the agenda is a staff report, and it has to do with lifting of the holding provisions for 761 Waterloo Street, and our Manager of Development Services will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 1675422 Ontario Inc. has applied to lift the holding provisions on the subject lands indicated on the attached draft zoning schedule, which are located north of the intersection of Market and Waterloo Streets at 761 Waterloo Street. Subject lands are zoned to permit the conversion of an existing building to an apartment dwelling units. Prior to the formal use of the lands as apartment dwelling units, the holding provision included in the zoning and lands, the holding provisions included in the zoning of the lands shall be removed. A site plan agreement for these lands have entered into the required redevelopment of the lands to accommodate apartment dwelling units and all associated on-site amenities. Once the site plan agreement has been put in place, the holding provisions could be removed.
Thank you, Bart. Then the recommendation is that council considering passing a bylaw to remove the holding provisions for the zoning bylaw for the lands described as Part Lot 4, Market Street North South, I think. Plan 296 being Part 4, Reference Plan 3R, 561, 761 Waterloo Street. Any questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. There are a number of, I guess there's 7 items there for Committee of the Whole's information. Questions to it? And the next item then is report of department heads, and there's 3 items there. One is the CAO succession, one is the 2015 water reports, and the other is purchase of a demonstrator fire truck. And I think they're there. I'm sure everyone's read them. Questions? Take a motion to adjourn then. Councillor Madison and Deputy Mayor Charbonneau, all in favor? We're adjourned until 8:45.